Escalante Route, a 12-mile unmaintained trail through the seemingly endless multicolored labyrinth of drainages and canyons in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, where hikers will find themselves in a 200-foot deep slot canyon, free climbing a 30-foot wall, hiking along below-in ruins, and so much more. This would be my third time on the Escalante Route, but this time I was accompanied by my wife and my dad. This was my dad's first ever backpacking trip. To make it even more challenging, he has type 1 diabetes and a failing transplanted pancreas. Because of this, his blood sugar will continue to be harder and harder to manage, and in the future, it'll be too risky for him to go into the backcountry. We didn't take the risk lightly and decided that in the end, the risk of this trail was worth the reward. The first day we did 9 miles, from the south rim at the Tanner Trailhead, all the way down to the river. No water sources along the whole thing, and the first 2 miles had snow and ice on it. But it was all downhill, big open views of Furnace Flats. So overall, it's just a really nice day hike. We ended up stopping at Tanner Beach, and that's where we decided to camp that night.
That is sweet. God. Amazing. You gotta see this. I guess he's seen it. He knows.
We pitched our tents at the eastern end of the Escalante Route, fell asleep listening to the sounds of Tanner Rapids, and the next morning we got up, made coffee, ate some cold oatmeal, and started making our way down the trail.
Pretty good climb. Pretty soon you look up, it's 1,000 feet down onto the river. Absolutely beautiful. Wow, that is amazing. That is unbelievable.
As the sun was setting, we made our way down off the ridgeline and into Escalante Creek. We ended up losing the trail here because it gets washed away by flash floods, but we eventually made it down to the beach, where we set up camp, and Kate and I spent the evening taking pictures of the rapids. It's about a mile shorter than what we were trying to make today, so we're just gonna have to wake up a little earlier to be able to bust that mile out. We made our way back to the river through the narrow canyon at the bottom of 75 Mile Creek. The sounds of Neville Rapids and gravel crunching under our feet echoed through the canyon while we stared at the swirling canyon walls carved away by thousands of years of flash floods. Once the canyon opened up back at the Colorado, we continued our journey downriver. We only had a couple of miles left to finish the Escalante, but its most difficult obstacles were still ahead of us. After some hesitation from my dad, he quickly made his way up the Papago wall.
Right up it though. Yeah, I didn't want to waste time if I wanted to get out of there.
Our elevation rose rapidly after the climb, and then we descended even quicker while we made our way down the Papago slope, a 300-foot tall rock slide. The descent was tense and quiet, broken by the occasional sound of rock tumbling down the steep chute of gravel and boulders. Once we made it back down to the river, we were rewarded with views of Red Canyon and a group of kayakers and rafters making their way through Hance Rapids. This was the end of the Escalante route, but we still had 10 miles and 5,000 feet of vert to go. This would prove to be the most difficult part of our trip, not just because of the elevation, but because the climbing would make my dad's blood sugar drop dramatically. We had faced a low blood sugar the day before when we were hiking through Furnace Flats. Low blood sugar makes you feel weak and confused. A glucose shot took care of it. We also dealt with a high blood sugar that morning. A blood sugar spike like this makes it very difficult to hike because your blood gets thicker. So for the remainder of the trip, he would have to check his blood sugar every 5 minutes or so in order to stay on top of any lows. Even though we were stressed with the challenge of managing my dad's blood sugar, the beauty of the canyon makes it very easy to keep your morale high. We hiked up the Tonto Trail and away from the Colorado River, with hopes of getting to camp in our next water source before sunset. Camped at Hance Creek with the red wall towering above us. The next morning, we packed up camp and began the climb up the last 3,200 feet to Grandview. My dad didn't take his insulin because the amount of climbing we had to do would make his blood sugar plummet even without it. The system we came up with was this. He would eat a snack every 30 minutes and a meal at Horseshoe Mesa in order to keep his blood sugar at an optimal level, and it worked perfectly. We continued up what seemed to be endless switchbacks, pushing through snow, ice, and the burning sensation in our quads. This trip was the most memorable I've had out of thousands of miles walked and several months of my life I've spent in the outdoors. Being able to take some of the most important people in my life into the backcountry of my favorite landscape on the planet is an indescribable feeling. And also being able to see my dad push through this disease that's caused him and my family so much pain and hardship over the years is incredible. His relentless heart and positivity will always inspire me.
Thinking that it's done. It's emotional. It is. Thinking this is probably the last trip that we'll get to do. Yeah. It's unreal. It's cool. Oh yeah. Oh, thank you. And also vacation. Yeah.